Welcome to What the World Needs Now with hosts Tom Whisinnand and Josh Monroe. We hope that you're able to leave feeling encouraged and ready for another day of changing lives in the field of education as we speak with inspirational teachers from across the nation and world about what keeps their spark lit.
In this episode, we take a pre-K pause to talk with Tell Williams, a pre-K teacher from Philadelphia, about his passion for advocacy and how literature can help build empathy in the world. Without any further ado, Tell Williams.
All right, Tell, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. For our listeners who don't have the privilege of knowing who you are, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what's your role in education?
All right, loaded question. But so I am from Indiana, but I now live in Philadelphia. I am a pre-K teacher, which is fun. I get the babies. Um, I've been doing this for 9 years. So my first six was with Head Start, the Head Start program, and now I'm with the public or the private schools. Yeah.
And how is the preschool life? Because I sit at home with my son who's in kindergarten, my
Yeah.
daughter who's 4, and then we've got a 7-month-old. I struggle with those 3. How
Right.
do you have a whole classroom of that?
Here's what I do. So one, I don't have kids at home, so that's helpful. So then what I do is when I'm at school, and I love the kids. I think you have to go in every day with a sense of humor because it's never going to go as you plan it.
Mm.
But I remind myself that after 7 hours, they go back to their parents, and I go home to a house with no kids. So I always tell myself this is temporary. If it's a really great day, then you don't want it to end. But if it's an off day, then you could just say, you know what? There's a time clock. At the end of the day, they go home, and we all get a breather from each other.
It's like nieces and nephews, huh, Tell?
Yes,
You get to spoil them and have fun with them all the time and then
yes,
send them back.
100%. Load them up on sugar and then send them back to mom and dad.
That's right. That's right. Hey, Tell, what made you want to get into education, number one, but then pursue, it's been a few years since you've been in education, really pursue the younger kids.
Right. So the funny thing is, I had amazing teachers growing up, right? But the funny thing is I never went to school for education, nor did I want to be a teacher. So what had happened is I went through a really bad breakup. And I was just sitting on my mom's couch, like crying for like 2 weeks. And my mom's like, I love you. You're done. Like, you're done with school. Let's figure something out. So she was actually a social worker for the Head Start program. So she had said, just until you find what you permanently want to do, why don't you come? You can be a substitute teacher. We need subs all the time, and just do that until you find out what you want to do. So I subbed for like 2 months, kind of going in and out of classrooms. And then they had a long-term sub position open, and they're like, do you want to do this? And I said, okay, like that sounds fine. I'll do it for a little bit. And once I was in my own classroom and I saw kids more than just a day, I saw the same class for like a week. I was like, oh, I kind of love this. And then the teacher didn't want to come back. And so they said, do you want this classroom permanently? I'm like, listen, I went to school for interpersonal communications. I have no idea what I'm doing. And they were like, that's fine. So an amazing thing about the Head Start program is at the time it was Monday through Thursday. And then on Fridays, you did your kind of social work day. You'd do home visits, you would do paperwork, all, IEPs. And so what they allowed me to do is I would teach Monday through Thursday and then all day Friday for 2 years. I went to school for education, and then I got my credentials and I got my licensing,
Oh,
and they
wow.
paid for all of it. Yeah. So it was amazing. It's obviously a huge privilege to be able to do that, but it's a very non-traditional way that I got into teaching for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So
Yeah,
you said you went to school for interpersonal communications,
correct.
broadcasting, like media. What?
No, the like not even just TikTok, YouTube, any kind of social media never was a goal. I wanted to go to school for interpersonal communications, and then after that, graduate and go to grad school for therapy.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it took a turn, not for the worse, obviously, because I love what I do, but it definitely was like a moment where I could sit there and think, and I was like, maybe teaching's what I want to do, or maybe it's the direction I want to go, and here we are.
And Tell, you mentioned TikTok, so we got to take a pre-K pause
A
there.
pre-K pause.
Tell, tell us a little bit about that journey, because you're inspiring millions of people now.
Yeah, it feels like that feels like a heavy burden to carry, a privileged one, but a heavy one. So when I moved away from my family in Indiana, I'm very, very, very close to them. My siblings and I have a group chat, and my brother-in-law would send TikToks in it, and he was like, "You have to make a TikTok." And this was only a year ago. And I was like, he's like, you tell us about the funny things that happen in your classroom. You always put them on Facebook, like just to let people know. I'm like, I don't think it will translate. I don't know that it's gonna be funny. And finally, they convinced me to make one. So I made a TikTok. I didn't have a username. I didn't have a profile picture, just made the TikTok and I fell asleep. I wake up the next day and my brother-in-law's like, it has 500,000 views. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, it does. Then I had like 50,000 followers. And then by the end of the day, I had 100,000 followers and it hit a million views. And I was like, maybe it was a fluke. We'll do one more. And here we are now.
That's awesome.
It,
It was something.
well, it really is cool because knowing you as the person that you are and what you do on TikTok and the way that you advocate for students. And I know that you teach preschool,
Right.
but I see you advocating for so many more kids than just your classroom.
Oh yeah.
I think that that's the amazing thing that you're doing with your account now.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially it turned into this account where I just wanted to kind of make teachers laugh and giggle a little bit, just because it's hard what we do. And then it turned into I was seeing again leaving Head Start, which if you know Head Start, it's a government funded pre-K program for people who are living, on the poverty line. So it's helping, the families that are at risk. And so going from there to teaching at a very privileged private school, um, it started out just making kind of fun jokes on TikTok and then being like, I need to advocate for these kids
Mm.
that aren't in my classroom anymore. And especially when the pandemic came up, I remember, our everything kind of shut down. My private school, they just said we're gonna, take a pre-K pause and we're gonna take a couple weeks off. And then I thought, my kids can go to their house and be read to their parents and stuff, but
Mhm.
other kids, their parents still have to work. So initially, I started a YouTube channel, and it was called Mr. Tell and Gary Bubbles, which was our class fish, and it was story time. So if nothing else, kids were at least getting, a 10-minute story by a teacher every day. And then that kind of translated into, eventually when I was started making the TikToks, I was like, we need, although I'm hoping that my TikToks are definitely made for teachers and parents and not so much kids. The advocating starts with teachers and parents. So it kind of molded into that. It's molded into advocating for, every type of child, and then also advocating for teachers as well.
I love it. I love it. And I think that it's so crucial that um like teachers realize the power that they have, and
Yeah,
you've recognized the power that you have to advocate for, you know, those those people who may not have the means to
right.
advocate for themselves. So kudos to you for jumping on that bandwagon and really owning that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was told early on, by one of my friends that teaching is a form of advocacy, and that kind of just like hit a light bulb every time I'm in class. I'm like, with books that we read, especially, and conversations we have with kids, like these are conversation starters. We're as cheesy as it is, like we are building the world we're going to live into tomorrow with these kids. And so I just want to, if I can make my class students a little bit less of jerks, as they get older, or they can say, Mr. Williams wouldn't have made fun of this person, or we talked about this when I was in pre-K. I'm hoping that, we can raise an amazing generation.
Man, we can too. We can definitely
Yeah.
with the way that I see you approach your videos and your content. We can make some great changes if we can teach people the importance of loving people for who they are, right?
Right.
Like if we get them to
Oh
see
yeah.
the person that's on the inside, man, this world could be so different. It could be so
Oh,
great.
100%.
Oh, I love everything that you do. I love
Thank
you.
you.
I gotta know when you were, because your world is way different than Tom and I's.
Yeah.
But also let's pause for a second. Like we got three dudes on here that teach little humans. How often
Right.
does that happen that you get three guys
Right.
talking education, talking
Right.
I mean, if you view or you look at education, how
Right.
it's not a very masculine thing
No.
for guys to be
Right.
doing, especially with little people. I gotta know, what do you do to invest in those kids? Like, how, when you're in preschool, how do you show them that you love them? With, I know you got the read alouds because you had
Yeah.
that talk, and how great was that? Like, that was a big moment for a lot of people in this world, to be able to see books that open their eyes beyond what
Right.
they know. What other
Right.
do you invest in your kids?
I mean, so I try to keep up on as much of what's going on in our world currently, right? Because when kids come into the classroom, they're not going to learn. And I know this from especially Head Start. Head Start was a great start to a place for me to build as a teacher as well. But if students don't feel safe in their classrooms, they're not going to learn. And so there are things that I don't think teachers or sometimes adults understand, that like kids know what's going on. They know what's going on in the world. They know, like, as much as like, we always say like kids aren't political. Kids hear what their parents are saying. They knew COVID was a thing, and so when we don't tell them these things, but they hear us whisper in the next room, that's scary for them. So I try to do is I try to find out what's going on currently in their lives, what I hear them playing, when they're doing pretend player on the playground, and I try to find books on that, or try to find lessons that we can do that kind of breaks it down. I was in my classroom, I put like pictures of Disney princesses or Blippi with a mask on. So I was like, we have to do this right now, and that's okay because they're wearing a mask, and it's not scary, and it's this and it's this. And so I think it's trying to take what they're hearing about anyways, and kind of breaking it down to a pre-K level to make them feel safe, because they're coming in with this anxiety, right? And it's also hearing things, talking to parents, building that relationship with the parents, find out what's going on in their students' world, and then doing lessons about that as an entire class without calling them out, right? So if I know the parents are going through a divorce, for example, I might read a book in class about different kind of families and what happens when parents separate, because that child doesn't know. I'm not calling that child out, but then that child feels like, oh, this could be a little bit normal. This isn't something that's just happening to me. There's books about it on other kids. That's definitely, I always start with literature, and then I grow from there.
I just love how you understand how learning works, and like if you don't know something, the natural response is fear, and so
Right.
it's our jobs to take that away from kids and talk about what is going on, because if they just get this much of it, they will be unable to learn. They have to understand what's going on, and
Right.
um, I love that. I tell my kids in my classroom, there's no secrets. I have no secrets. Like,
Right. Right.
we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about everything. There's no secrets, because you have to do away with the unknown for kids to
100%.
be able to process and learn. Tell, you have an amazing energy about you. Like, it's just coming through the screen. And I want to know how you stay inspired day in, day out. Keep that energy level high with these littles, because I know they take a lot. Um,
Right.
so how do you stay inspired, Tell?
Um, I don't know. I honestly truly wish I could tell you it's, I read this book or I say a mantra to myself, but like I I know that my experience at my childhood wasn't great, and I know that I had amazing teachers that were there and advocated for me. And I'm not talking about just through pre-K, I'm talking about every single step of the way until I graduated from high school. And I think that the days that I'm overwhelmed or days that I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, I think like I did not have a single teacher give up on me at all. To the point where when I came back to visit, they were like, "You went to college, like you did it. We did it for you. Like we got you there because everything was working against me and my siblings." And so I think about myself as a kid and think if I could be that for them, or just think about the positive things I've had happen. I've had, parents come in and be like, we definitely thought one way about you when we came in, and that changed. And so if I'm able to do that with one student a year or one family a year, it's 100% worth it. I want to leave the areas that I teach in in a better place than before I got there.
Well, you're doing it, right?
I'm trying.
You're living that life. And Tell, you've touched on some of the topics that are difficult for teachers, right? And
Yeah.
and that you're able to turn to literature to help kids understand things. Over the last year and a half, there's a lot of stuff that has gone down in education. It
Yeah.
has been a tough world, and you know it as much as I do. When we get on social media, we see this is bad, this is bad, this is bad.
Right.
As being a teacher, Tom's trying to get us onto a new start of what's good in education. Like what's going well, that instead of wallowing in
Yeah.
this hardness, because we know it's hard,
We
but
know it's hard.
it was also hard before COVID. Like, it's thrown
Right.
another layer on, but we're
Yeah.
teachers, right? Like, we adapt, we
Yeah.
differentiate. So
Yeah.
what's going well in education right now? What are we doing that we can raise the roof to and
Right.
pump up a little bit?
You know, as much and I love advocating for kids, and I feel like I do that quite a bit. And something else I do is I very hard am advocating for teachers, right? And I always say, and I think validating helps. Teaching is hard. Teaching during the pandemic sometimes felt impossible. And we had teachers that really stepped up to the challenge. And I think something that our education system does well is we have teachers that are loving, we have teachers that are incredible, and we have teachers that are amazing. So I think that one of the solid things we do is we have really great teachers out there. We have teachers who really, I mean, politics and everything aside, we had teachers that came in that were scared to come in during the pandemic, but knew it was important because they knew that that was a safe place for kids. We had teachers that still got sick from that. We had teachers, have teachers that show up every single day. And before the pandemic, it was scary, right? And they're still showing up. So I think that we have to commend teachers because it's not easy. And I don't think that they get enough credit for the strength that they have going in every day. It's hard. It's hard.
It's hard. You just talk about the uncertainty and talk
Yeah.
about being scared and how you
Yeah.
can't learn. Well, it's hard to be really effective when I'm scared because I don't know what the end of the day looks like, what the end of the day looks like for my students, if we're going to be open or closed, or who's going to be remote, who's going to show up to learn. That was tough. That uncertainty is really really powerful. And I hope that teachers, when we're out of this, recognize what a time it was, so that when we do return to a little bit of normalcy, we can celebrate and we can, not go up the same mountain. Our superintendent's amazing. He said, why go up the same mountain? Education needs to find a new mountain and find a new mountaintop.
100%. Oh yeah. 100%.
Right. We want to model all of these things for kids, like resilience. We want to tell them, like, hey, don't give up when it's tough. Don't quit. And we've got so many teachers that are doing that day in and day out. And it's important that we remind ourselves, right? Like, this has been really tough. It's not easy. But what we're modeling
it's not.
What we're modeling for our kids through all of that is so important.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's like different lessons too, right? Because there of course was a bunch of teachers that were just can't do it. And it's valid. But and I also think there's lessons in that too that we can do. So I love to take a negative thing and make it into a positive, right? So it's probably heart-wrenching when kids have teachers leave, and I get that. And I think it's important that I'm never going to be like, I can't move you off the classroom. I'm hoping that as teachers leave the classroom, they're having conversations with their students, because I think that's important too, because we can look at it and the kids can consider it. And I know my little mind at 7, 8 years old would think, oh, they quit. But I think there's also something to be said for a teacher say, hey, I need to take care of me, and I'm not taking care of me here, or I'm not getting the support I need to take care of myself and to take care of you. I need to take a step back, and hopefully I will be back sometime. Because I feel like if we're not lucky enough to be supported by our administrators, and a lot of people are, we have some great administrators out there, great principals that advocate for their teachers, and we have others that don't. And so if you're under that umbrella of an educator that doesn't have that support, it's important that we lift up each other and we support each other. And if a teacher says, I will be back, but I can't do this right now, then we have to hope and pray that they can kind of refine themselves in teaching, find that passion again, and hopefully return to the classroom one day. Because a lot of good ones are leaving, and a lot of good ones are staying.
I think that's the hard part, is that we know that there's a lot of good ones leaving. How
A lot of good ones.
I don't know, Tell. I mean, now I feel like we got to start asking you some questions that they're gonna fix America.
Right. No,
I mean,
there's no way.
you're right. We've got so many great teachers that are leaving. How do we stop that? Right? Like, how do we? What are some things that we can? I don't know. I'm trying to make it simplistic, but I know that it's such a
You're
complex
not.
question.
It is. I think one thing I always say is that validating people helps, right? When we're sitting there telling teachers like it's not that bad, or if we had administrators and support that said, this is hard what you do, and I appreciate it, and showed ways of appreciation. I think sometimes we just want to be validated and live in a moment of this is hard, and need to be told, yes, what you're doing is very hard. I think that right now everything is difficult. There's a shortage of teachers, which puts a strain on the teachers that are staying. So I mean, I know so many educators who are like, I am at school right now with strep throat because they said it wasn't COVID. And no other time other than COVID would we have even thought to ask a teacher to come in with strep throat. Or something I love about TikTok is going live and hearing other teachers connect. And they'll be like, my husband was in a terrible car accident the other day, and I had to come to school the next day because they didn't have coverage. So I think just kind of being honest with ourselves and recognizing that we're still in a pandemic, and not even a pandemic of COVID, but a pandemic of the American school system and our educators. We don't have enough of them right now. And so I think being honest with ourselves about that, and not just doing PDs on how to do self-care, but to really implement it at your school. I don't know if you saw this, like, going on Facebook, but a school literally said, I know that you guys only had Thursday, Friday off for Thanksgiving. You're taking the whole week off. We're not going to make it up. Take a week off. The teachers need it. So I know that every school can't do that, obviously, but I think there's little things we can do. Trust your teachers that they know how to do lesson plans. Maybe take the strain off of that and say, you don't have to turn in every day at 9 a.m. You've been doing this for 20 years. I think you know how to do a lesson plan. But there's ways that we can look at what we're doing. And just because we've always done it that way, ask the teachers, what do you need right now that makes it worthwhile to stay? Because there are teachers who love their students and still are burnout, and that's a difficult place to be.
So difficult to be.
Yeah.
And there's nobody to come in and replace you. There's nobody to
No.
come in. Your husband was in a car wreck. There's nobody to come in and take your spot so you can be mentally present
Right.
with your loved one. My God,
Correct. Yeah.
that's incredible.
Right. I mean, if you're in the classroom and you're dealing with this, if you're sick, or you're worried about whoever is at home that might have gotten hurt or sick, you're not in the classroom that day, and that's only feeding your burnout, right? Because you're impatient, you're grumpy, you're grouchy, you're not treating your kids best, you're not treating your colleagues, your administrators best. If that teacher just had the chance to have a single day off
Mm.
and not come to school with that burnout and that feeling, it wouldn't carry on for the entire week, right?
And
And there's no solution to that. I mean, if you don't
no,
have subs, what do you do? Do you cancel class for that teacher? I don't know the answer.
no.
Um,
And then the guilt
I
that
just
goes
know that.
along with that too.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
I had to go to school. I didn't put in my best this day. The kids
right,
knew it. I knew it. I'll go back tomorrow and try to do better and move mountains again. And the stress and anxiety that goes along with that. It's just
right.
it's like a vicious cycle, you know. So once a
It
teacher
really
starts
is.
on that downward like burnout cycle, it just
Right.
perpetuates, you know, Tell.
It's so hard to
Um,
get out of. Yeah,
yeah. Hey, I've always wondered about this. So, I love social emotional learning, and it is a
yeah,
huge component of what I do in my classroom, and I know it's a huge component of what Josh does in his too. Um, I want to hear it from you though, because you work with the littles. Like,
I do.
how big of a deal and how big of a foundation is social emotional learning in um, the little classroom, and how do you start that in your classroom?
So that is the foundation of what we do in pre-K, right? So we obviously want to send our kindergarten, our pre-Kers to kindergarten with ABCs and letter number recognition, all that. Children will not learn if they're not social and emotionally ready to learn. And so our job, as much as the academic side is to get them ready for that. So we do a lot about Sharing is a huge thing, which sounds so silly, right? But sharing's more than just a pencil. It's sharing is also turn taking. Sharing's also sharing in conversation with people. It's sharing ideas. There's every classroom I think should have a quiet or an emotion area where if a child is grumpy or upset and they don't know how to vocalize that, there should be pictures they can point to. There should be signs they can hold up. Giving kids that expressive language to say I'm upset about this, or to be able to share that with another student. Say, I talk about I messages. I felt this way when I talk about apologizing a lot, which is a huge thing for social and emotional. And I let them know like apologizing is a great thing to do, but apologizing also probably only makes you feel great, right? If you hit a child, you always have hit them. So apologizing is always the polite thing to do. Teach them why you're apologizing, but also recognize, maybe try not to do things that will lead you to have to apologize. In books, I know I keep coming back to that, but there's so much learning we can do through books. And I'm not just talking about reading a book, closing it, and being like, that was great, but to talk about the emotions of it. When you see a picture of a child in the book crying, why is that child crying? I try to stay away from words like happy or sad or angry. I think angry is a secondary emotion. So if a child's angry, they're frustrated, they're depressed, they're lonely, they're missing a parent. So it's when we give them those happy, sad, angry, if we can dig in deeper for longing or lonely or grumpy, grouchy, I think it really starts with allowing kids to feel and let that feelings be the feeling that's okay. Outbursts are exhausting for teachers. I'd rather have a child outburst and throw a tantrum than a child not give me kind of any expression at all and not be able to vent. Because if a child's throwing a tantrum in your classroom, they feel safe enough to show emotion.
Tel, I'm curious, and Tom, I don't know if your mind went right to it when he said they've got to be able to feel, but I went right to the book Permission to Feel. I don't know if you've ever read it, but
I have not.
Oh man, when you're talking about this stuff, it just took me right to that book about allowing kids that chance to have those big emotions and then steering them. How do we handle those? How do we regulate them? Right? Like all of us have big emotions, whether you're the
100%.
student. Like there's times in my day that I feel like just crumpling up my book and throwing it across the room, but I can take that moment to pause, pre-K pause,
Right.
and
A pre-K pause.
and how do I regulate it? So when you said that, I just went right to that book. If you're listening right now, go find that book. Mark Brackett's, is that right, Tom?
Yep, Mark Brackett from Yale University.
Okay.
Does amazing things. Absolutely.
I need to look up this book now.
Oh,
it's good. It's good not just for kids, but also for adults. Super meaningful, super transformative in the way I viewed emotions and emotional regulation with my students and even myself as an adult. We have a lot of different listeners from all over the place. If somebody's just starting their journey in education, and I mean, what a time to start. It's difficult. It's tough.
Right.
It's like nothing we've ever had before. What advice do you have to give them?
I get this question a lot when I'm on live, and before I was like, I don't know, like I don't know what to tell you, because it's just like, but I don't know if this is the best advice. It's not gonna be like read this book or do this, but you have to go into it with a sense of humor. Like if you're able to sit there at the most trying part of your day and just be like, okay, like like this is awful. Everything has an end point, right? We're fine. We're going to get through this. But I always say go into your classroom with a sense of humor. I don't mean to ha laugh, but to be able to sit there and kind of pull out of yourself at a mind numbing time and be like, this is fine. It's exhausting right now. It'll be fine. Nothing is permanent. We can get through this. And having that mindset and that sense of humor and this is of grace with yourself, because you're not going to be Miss Honey every day. You're going to have Miss Honey days and you're going to have Miss Trunchbull days, and that's okay. And so I think just having that grace and that humor with yourself, tip number one. Tip number two, always have an extra change of clothes in your car. Always.
is there a story behind that? Like,
Oh, 1,000. So
drop the T.
Drop the so it was actually my first year teaching was just such a mess, right? Because I was figuring out. So I would consider my first real year permanently in the classroom start to finish. I had a little guy, and we had an AM class and a PM class, and he would scream the entire time, blood curdling scream, from the moment he got off the bus to the moment he got put on the bus. And I've never had a child who just like wasn't ready to go to school. You know what I mean? Because usually they're ready, they're resilient. It's the last day that he's there. He screamed all week. He abruptly stops, like, I have to go to the bathroom now. I'm like, oh, he's not crying though. So I'm walking him down the hall to the bathroom. I had our class social worker, and we had a sub that day because in pre-K you have two teachers in the room. My co-teacher was out, so we had a sub. So the sub and the social worker stayed with the kids. I walk him down the hall. He goes in the bathroom. Now he's a 5-year-old, and we're in an elementary school that's pre-K through 6. So these are like 6th grade bathrooms, right? So he's in there, and 5 minutes goes by, and I call him. I'm like, "Are you doing okay?" He's like, "I'm fine." I'm like, "Great." 10 minutes goes by. I'm like, "Are you sure you're okay?" He's like, "I think I need help." I said, "Okay, that's fine," because kids like need help with buttons. I get it. He opens his stall and is covered head to toe in poo, and I was like, "Cool, cool." Hold on. So I like stick my head out. I holler at the office. I'm like, I need the nurse and the janitor. So the nurse is able to get him like cleaned up for the most part. We call his parents saying, hey, you might need to stop by. He might need to go home and shower. I help him put on his shoe. Like, we get him changed. I help him put on his shoes. At the time, my head was about like this, was completely shaved. I was tutoring a student who was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and so he was bald. So I shaved my head, and I would go tutor him, and so I had no hair. And I'm sitting at the desk, and all day I can smell it. And the social worker's like, "Tell, it's just because it's just stuck in your nose." I'm like, "No, I smell it." So I'm like on my computer, I'm typing to the principal. I'm like, "Hey, I think that this student might not be ready. It's just pre-K. He can come again next year." And I go to scratch my head, and I go to type again. I was like, "Huh?" And I again it was just scalp. And I think when I went to go put on his shoe and he went to go balance, must have gotten it on my scalp, and it was on my clothes. And I was like, so I ran to the sink. I ruined my shirt because I poured bleach on my shirt, poured bleach on my head, went back, and I'm like, I think he needs to come back next year. I think he needs to try next year. We got it next year. So now I always have and I've had several things happen since then. Kids get sick, all that stuff. An extra shirt, extra pants, extra shoes in your car, you're golden.
Got a to-go bag.
Yeah.
You just need a little to-go bag, and you're good to.
You need a to-go bag. And shampoo doesn't hurt either,
No. Wow. That might be the best story that we've ever had on here, for sure.
It was rough. It was a rough start to the school year.
I was gonna say, I have to admit that was a rough moment, but at least now we can sit here and we're cracking up. I'm crying right now. Right. There's been a lot of things that this world has needed over decades and decades and decades and centuries. I got to know from your perspective, what does the world need now? What do we need more of or less of? And it can be education, it could be something totally not related to school. What do we need to be a better society?
I think somewhere, specifically within the last, I would say like 15 years, we've really lost empathy, and this disregard of just trying to like build empathy towards other people. I think one of the best things you can do is sit down or talk to someone that is a different faith than you, is a different political party than you, is different in any aspect or in any way, and just have a conversation with them. Maybe it's the naive part of me, but I think that many of us have commonality. I think that many of us have a little bit more similarity than what we might think. And I think that if we're able to sit down and have these conversations and find common ground with each other, we might be able to build more empathy. Because I think that this lack of being able to kind of sit in other people's shoes for a moment is just unfortunate dividing us more and more.
I think you're absolutely right, Tell. I think the world could definitely use empathy and more good discussions. And I think that as humans, we do have more in common than what we want to recognize sometimes, because darn it, it is really easy not to like you if I want to. But if I
Oh,
sit down and get to know you,
100%.
it's really hard to be mad at my friends for very long.
And
Right, right. I also I also do this thing where if I'm really mad at someone, I imagine them as a toddler or a baby. I don't know why I told a professor this one time, like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I'm like, no, because like you can't be mad at a baby. So I get really mad at someone. I just was like, I wonder what they were like as a baby. And then I'd pretend that like they're a child and that like then I'm like, okay, don't be mad at a baby.
take your levels down a little bit.
Right, exactly.
I think you're doing an amazing job with bringing the world more empathy through TikTok and Instagram, through what you're doing with your kids with literature. Like I think what you were saying is perfect. Books are a great way to bring people together and understand other perspectives. So the world needs more empathy. We can't argue with that, but you are doing a great job of expanding that empathy to millions of people. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Tell, it was great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. We're so thankful and appreciative that you took your time to listen to our guest, Tell Williams. Hopefully, you're ready for another week of changing lives, and hopefully, what the world needs now is helping you to sustain your inspiration as we journey through this school year together. If it is, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps us to get inspirational educator stories out.
We hope that as you head out, you remember that the biggest factor that plays into student success is you. Your love, your passion, your empathy, your dedication is exactly what the world needs now. Thank you for all you do. Have a good one.